Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
We are so glad to have you here with us.
Yeah, we really are. And, we are diving into a topic today that sits right at this really intense intersection. It's something profoundly emotional on one side, and then incredibly, sometimes just frustratingly bureaucratic on the other.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast is sharp.
Right, because we're talking about this deeply human, very ancient desire to return a loved one to nature.
Which is an urge that stretches back to the very beginnings of human history, really.
Exactly. I mean, you lose someone you love, someone who maybe they felt most alive when they were hiking through a dense green forest, or standing at the edge of a mountain lake.
Or looking out over a rugged coastline, yeah.
Yeah. And when they pass, the most natural instinct in the world is to say, I want to bring them back there. I want their final resting place to be in those wild, beautiful spaces they cherished.
It's a beautiful, poetic desire.
It is. But as with everything in our modern world, that poetic desire crashes headfirst into the strict, rigid, and honestly very confusing legal realities of public land management. I was reading up on the overarching legal guidelines for scattering ashes in outdoor spaces, specifically public parks.
And it's a maze, isn't it?
Oh, it's an absolute maze. Environmental laws, permitting processes, strict rules governing where you can even step. Okay, let's unpack this. We have a lot of ground to cover, literally and figuratively.
We really do. And I'm looking forward to walking through this with you today, because the mission of our deep dive today is to act as your guide. We want to help you, the listener, navigate the legal, the environmental, and the logistical frameworks of outdoor ash scattering.
Which I imagine sounds a bit dry to some people right now.
Right, and that's why I want to set a very specific tone right from the beginning. Digging into these rules, talking about permits and regulations and soil chemistry, it absolutely does not strip the romance or the profound meaning from the ceremony.
That's a relief to hear.
I actually argue it does the exact opposite. Understanding these guidelines is what ensures a tribute remains respectful, lawful, and peaceful. Because, well, think about it. The absolute last thing anyone wants when they are in the middle of a deeply emotional, vulnerable memorial is to be interrupted by a park ranger.
Oh man, that would be terrible.
Or to realize they're unintentionally harming the very landscape their loved one adored. So we are going to break down the why behind these regulations, which is actually quite fascinating when you look closely at how public lands are managed.
That is the perfect way to frame it. We aren't here to ruin the poetry of the moment with red tape. We're here to make sure the poetry actually gets to happen uninterrupted.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the very first hurdle I encountered when looking into this material. It's what I'm calling the jurisdictional jungle.
That's a great name for it.
Right, because it starts with how casually we all use the term state park. I think this is where so many people make their very first misstep.
No, without a doubt, it's the most common trap.
Because in everyday conversation, if I see a patch of protected green space, maybe it has a hiking trail and a wooden sign at the entrance, I just call it a state park. But the reality of who actually owns and manages that land is vastly more complicated, isn't it?
It is incredibly complicated. Jurisdiction is the crucial first step you have to take before you even begin planning a ceremony, before you even pick a date.
Really? Before anything else?
Yes, because the term state park is just a colloquial catch-all for most of us. The reality is that public lands are managed by this massive overlapping patchwork of different governing authorities.
Like who?
Well, you have state park departments, obviously, but then you also have the National Park Service, which is federal. You have county park agencies, protected wildlife reserves run by the Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management territories, even local municipal recreation areas.
Okay, that's a lot of different badges.
It is.
Yeah.
And why this matters so deeply to you as someone trying to plan a memorial is that every single one of these governing bodies has vastly different mandates and therefore vastly different rule books.
Oh, wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If I'm just standing in a forest, why does it matter if the forest is owned by the state versus the federal government? That's all just trees and dirt, right? Why would the rules be wildly different?
That is exactly what most people think.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the foundational purpose of why that specific land was protected in the first place.
Okay, meaning what?
For example, a protected wildlife reserve. It exists primarily to protect sensitive species and habitats. Human recreation is entirely secondary there, or sometimes actively discouraged.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Therefore, their rules on scattering ashes, bringing in groups of people, or even walking off a designated trail, those rules are going to be incredibly strict. They might ban it outright because their mandate is zero human impact.
Right. They don't want you there at all, ideally.
Exactly. Conversely, a county recreation park, which is designed primarily for public use, think playgrounds, picnic pavilions, community gatherings, they might have a much more relaxed set of guidelines. The land is meant to be actively utilized by large groups of people.
Okay, that actually makes perfect sense. So you could have a situation where a grieving family makes a really innocent mistake.
It happens all the time.
You might think, well, my friend scattered her mother's ashes at that big county park last year, and it was totally fine. So I'm just going to go to this beautiful wildlife refuge 20 miles away and do the exact same thing.
And suddenly, you are violating federal conservation laws.
Without having any malicious intent whatsoever. You just didn't realize that the patch of grass you were standing on was governed by a totally different agency.
Exactly. You are essentially trying to play a board game, but you don't realize you're using the rule book for Monopoly when you are actually sitting at a chessboard.
That's a great analogy.
So let's walk through the practical application of this for you, the listener. Let's say you have a very specific location in mind. Let's imagine there is a stunning scenic overlook, a rugged cliffside where your loved one used to sit and watch the sunrise every Sunday.
Sounds beautiful.
It is. But your very first action item cannot be planning the ceremony. It can't be picking out readings or inviting family. Your first action item must be playing digital detective. You need to identify who actually owns and manages that specific patch of dirt and rock.
And how do you even do that? Because I've been on a million hikes where you just pull off the side of the highway, walk down a trail, and there are absolutely no signs telling you who is in charge.
It definitely requires some sleuthing. You have to look up the specific name of the location or the trail. Often, pulling up the location on a detailed mapping app or checking local government tourism websites will list the managing agency.
So you have to really dig in.
Yes. And once you know if it is the state park department versus a county agency or the BLM, you then have to go to that specific agency's official website. You cannot rely on general advice from blogs. You have to find the specific park's webpage.
Because that's where the actual legal guidelines are.
Right. Finding the right agency is what connects you to the correct forms, the right contact information, and the actual laws governing that specific acre of land.
Okay, so let's say I do my detective work. I find out that the cliffside is indeed a state park. I go to their website and I find the rules. This brings up something that I honestly found a bit jarring when I was reading the source material.
The permits.
Yes, the requirement for a permit. Now, I have to be honest, I felt some genuine friction reading about this.
A lot of people do. It's a very common reaction.
Because you are dealing with profound grief. You are trying to execute a deeply spiritual, emotional act of saying goodbye to someone who shaped your life. And the system essentially says, okay, we hear you, but first, please fill out this bureaucratic form in triplicate and wait for approval.
It feels cold.
It feels so clinical. If it's just me and my brother quietly taking our dad's ashes to a trail, why on earth do I need to involve the government? It feels like a massive overreach.
I completely understand why it feels clinical, and it is a very natural reaction to feel frustrated or even insulted by it. When you're grieving, administrative tasks can feel insurmountable.
Yeah, you just don't have the bandwidth for paperwork.
Exactly. You feel like your grief is unique and personal, which it is, and a government form treats it like a data point. But this is where we need to reframe the concept of the permit. The rules aren't written by park rangers sitting in an office trying to gatekeep your grief.
They aren't.
Not at all. They aren't trying to make your life harder or police your mourning. Permits are essential tools for park management. They are essentially an air traffic control system for the wilderness.
Air traffic control, how so?
Well, the application usually asks for a few very specific details. The date of the scattering, the number of people attending, and the exact location within the park where this ceremony will take place.
Okay, pretty standard stuff.
Right. And why did they need this? Because their job is to prevent overcrowding, to manage infrastructure, and to protect sensitive natural areas from being overwhelmed. Imagine you and your brother hike out to that beautiful cliffside to scatter your dad's ashes.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It's supposed to be a quiet, private, transcendent moment. But because there was no permit system, another family of 20 people also decided to scatter ashes at that exact same cliffside on the exact same Saturday morning. And maybe a local bird watching club also decided to hold a meetup there.
Oh, wow. Okay. That would be an absolute
I think
nightmare.
it'll be chaos.
Yeah, that quiet, transcendent moment is completely shattered. You wouldn't have privacy. You'd be talking over other people. The parking lot would be jammed. It would be incredibly stressful.
Precisely. The permit process is essentially a scheduling and traffic control system that ultimately protects your experience. It ensures that when you arrive, you have the space and the peace you were counting on.
So it's actually working in your favor.
Exactly. And in most cases, these permits are approved quickly and painlessly. As long as you're agreeing to follow the established guidelines, the park wants to accommodate you. They aren't looking for reasons to say no. They're looking for ways to say yes safely.
That's a huge relief. Do they cost money?
It is worth noting that while some states issue these free of charge, others do charge a small administrative fee to process the request. But paying that small fee and filling out that form grants you something incredibly valuable, which is permission and peace of mind.
Let's talk about that peace of mind, because I think that is the hidden benefit here. Let's say you decide to go rogue.
Which I highly advise against.
Right, but say you do. You think, I'm not paying a fee. I'm not dealing with the government. I'm just going to sneak the urn in my backpack, hike up the trail, and do it quickly.
You're going to be miserable.
You are going to spend the entire ceremony looking over your shoulder. You are going to be flooded with anxiety. Every time you hear a twig snap or another hiker approaches or you see a uniform in the distance, your heart is going to race.
You won't be present for the memorial at all.
Exactly. You'll feel like a trespasser. But if you have that permit, you are bulletproof. You have every right to be there.
That is the exact word for it. Bulletproof. You are trading a small amount of administrative friction up front for total peace of mind on the day of the ceremony.
Hmm.
And there is very specific, actionable piece of advice that the sources recommend here.
Which is?
Carry a physical, printed copy of the permit with you during the ceremony.
Physical paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't just leave it in your email inbox on your phone, because cell service in state parks is notoriously unreliable. Don't assume it is magically in the park ranger's computer system out in the woods. Have the printed paper folded in your pocket.
That makes total sense, because if a park ranger or staff member does happen to walk by and inquire about what your group is doing, you don't want to get into a verbal debate.
Or try to pull up a blurry PDF on your phone while you were crying.
Exactly. You want to be able to quietly hand them the paper, let them see you are fully authorized, and allow them to walk away with a nod so you can return to your memorial. It acts as the ultimate do not disturb sign.
That's beautifully put. It instantly clarifies the situation and de-escalates any potential tension. Now, you mentioned earlier the idea of just you and your brother going out to the trail.
Right.
That's a very small gathering. But the permit process often asks for the exact number of attendees for a very specific reason, which brings us to a fascinating threshold in park management, the concept of a special event.
Yes. This was wild to me when I read it. I was marveling at how quickly a simple family memorial can escalate, legally speaking, into what the state considers a highly regulated special event.
Mhm.
Where is the line actually drawn?
It happens much faster than people realize. State parks have to regulate group activities to prevent disruption to the ecosystem and to other visitors. Now, if it's just you, your brother, and maybe your spouses walking quietly down a trail, that is the small, low-impact ceremony.
Barely a footprint.
Right. It typically does not trigger the special events threshold, though you still need the basic scattering permit depending on the park. But the moment you start adding elements to your memorial, the legal landscape shifts.
Elements like what?
If you invite 30 extended family members and friends, if someone brings an acoustic guitar to play your dad's favorite song, if you set up a small folding podium for speeches, or bring in folding chairs for elderly relatives.
Even just chairs.
Even just chairs. If you organize a catered picnic afterward at the site, the moment you introduce those elements, you cross an invisible line. Park authorities will now classify your memorial as a special event.
And once you hit that special event status, a whole new level of bureaucracy kicks in, right? You need different permits, maybe insurance, higher fees.
Yes, it becomes a much bigger logistical undertaking.
But again, if I look at this from the park's perspective, I can see why it's not about the grief, it's about the infrastructure.
It is entirely about infrastructure and the shared use of public land. Let's break it down practically. If 30 people show up for your memorial, they aren't all carpooling in one minivan.
No, definitely not.
They are probably arriving in 15 different cars. That instantly impacts the parking lot capacity for everyone else who came to the park that day.
That's a great point.
And if you are playing music and using a small PA system for speeches, those noise levels carry for miles, especially across open spaces or over water. That completely alters the experience of a camper a mile away who came to the park seeking quiet solitude.
Yeah, you don't think about how far sound travels in the wild.
It travels incredibly far.
Mhm.
Plus, a large group of 30 people taking up a section of a trail physically blocks traffic for other hikers. The park has to manage all of these physical variables. So additional permits for a special event are required to specifically manage parking allocation, crowd size limits, and noise curfews.
So, what does this all mean for the listener who is right in the middle of planning a tribute? It means you have to make some fundamental, honest decisions about the type of ceremony you truly want before you finalize your location.
Exactly. You have to balance your vision against the legal hurdles you're willing to jump.
If your vision is a massive, joyous celebration of life with 50 of your loved ones' friends, live music, a catered lunch, and an open microphone for eulogies, a strict, protected state park might actually be the wrong venue.
It probably is the wrong venue.
You might want to look at renting a private outdoor venue or a large pavilion at a county recreation park where those activities are expected and easily accommodated.
That is a brilliant point.
Yeah.
You have to adapt the ritual to the reality of the space. If you want that pristine, wild state park setting, the quiet cliffside, the untouched forest, you have to embrace a much quieter, more intimate, bare bones approach. You are a guest in the wilderness, and your ceremony has to reflect that.
Well said.
And part of adapting to this space means understanding exactly where within that park you are legally allowed to go. Because even if you have your permit, and even if you kept your group down to just 4 people, you cannot just walk up to any random tree or riverbank and scatter the ashes.
Right. The parks are essentially divided into zones, and many of those zones are strictly off limits, even to permitted scatterings. Some of them make intuitive sense, like maintaining a distance from heavily trafficked trails and active campsites.
Let's use an analogy here to explain why the trail and campsite restrictions exist. Think of the state park like a massive shared living room.
Okay.
You can come in, sit down, and have a deeply meaningful conversation. But you have to remember that there are other people in the living room having their own experiences. The people hiking that trail or setting up their tent in that campsite have come to the park for their own reasons: recreation, stress relief, family time.
Yeah, they didn't sign up for a funeral.
Exactly. They did not consent to being unexpectedly exposed to human remains or to stumbling into the middle of an incredibly intimate, grief-stricken ceremony.
That would be so jarring. Imagine you are just out for a casual Saturday morning jog with your dog. You turn a blind corner on the trail, and you are suddenly standing 3 feet away from a weeping family in the middle of a eulogy.
It's extremely uncomfortable for everyone involved.
It violates their privacy, and it completely disrupts their recreation. The distance requirements, which are often 100 yards or more from any trail or facility, ensure that boundaries are respected on both sides.
Precisely. But beyond the human element, there are environmental off-limit zones that often catch people by surprise. And what's fascinating here is the specific regulations around water.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
One common rule you will encounter across almost all jurisdictions involves maintaining a strict distance from water sources. Rivers, lakes, streams, oceans, and even dry creek beds that fill during the rain.
Okay, this is where I need you to explain the logic to me, because this feels incredibly counterintuitive.
It does feel that way to a lot of people.
Because we've all seen the movie trope, right? The solemn family standing on a beautiful stone bridge or on the back of a boat, and they gently pour the ashes into the rushing river to be carried out to sea. Cinematic history has conditioned us to think this is the standard, most beautiful way to do it.
It's deeply ingrained in our culture.
And scientifically speaking, the cremation process burns at such a high temperature that the resulting ashes are completely sterile. They are basically just crushed minerals. They don't carry disease. So why on earth can't I scatter my loved one's ashes into a river? What is the actual danger?
It is a great question. And the cultural expectation you mentioned for movies makes it very confusing for families. The reality is that scattering directly into protected waterways often violates broad, sweeping environmental protection laws.
Okay.
Laws like the Federal Clean Water Act or specific state-level water purity regulations.
Okay.
These laws are not usually written with nuanced exceptions for cremated remains. They're often written with a zero-tolerance policy for introducing any foreign particulate matter into a protected water source.
So the law doesn't care that it's a sterile tribute to my grandmother. The law just sees unauthorized solid matter being dumped into the municipal watershed.
Exactly. The laws are blanket protections designed to prevent contamination from all sources, whether it's industrial runoff, agricultural waste, or sterile calcium phosphate from an urn.
It's all treated the same legally.
Yes. If park rangers allowed exceptions for ashes, it would create a massive legal gray area regarding what constitutes safe dumping.
Wow.
Therefore, to maintain the absolute integrity of the water supply and the aquatic ecosystem, many states and parks mandate that ashes must be scattered a specific distance away.
How far away?
Sometimes 100 yards, sometimes up to a mile away from any water source. And this isn't just to keep it out of the water directly, it's to prevent the ashes from washing down the watershed into the stream during the next heavy rain.
That is such a vital piece of information. So if I can't go near the water and I can't go near the trails and I can't go near the campsites, where can I go?
It could feel limiting.
It does.
Right.
This is exactly why the source material strongly suggests consulting park rangers directly when you are trying to find the right spot. I think people are intimidated by rangers, but they are the ultimate insiders.
They absolutely are. Don't view the ranger as a police officer waiting to catch you breaking a rule. View them as your concierge to the wilderness. They know the geography of that park better than anyone alive.
Yeah, they live and breathe that terrain.
They know which areas are legally permitted, but more importantly, they know the hidden, secluded spots. If you call the park office and explain, hey, I have my permit, I'm bringing 3 people, and we are looking for a beautiful, quiet spot that complies with all the rules, the ranger will likely help you.
They'll give you direction.
They'll say, I know exactly where you should go. Take the North Trail for a mile, turn left at the old oak tree, and there's a secluded forest clearing that nobody visits on a Tuesday morning. They hold the map to the spots that offer stunning natural beauty, minimal environmental impact, and the absolute privacy your family deserves.
I love that. Let them help you. But when we talk about maps and off-limit zones, I realized I was only thinking about the physical landscape. The trees, the water, the trails. I was completely caught off guard by another layer of restrictions I came across in the guidelines.
Let me guess. History.
Yes. I never even considered the historical or cultural restrictions.
This is an incredibly profound point, and it's a blind spot for almost everyone. We tend to view public lands simply as nature, an untouched wilderness that exists outside of human history. But the reality is that these landscapes are deeply layered with human history.
They aren't blank slates.
Not at all. Public lands are repositories of our collective past. State and national parks often preserve historically important landscapes, indigenous heritage sites, and fragile archaeological resources.
This makes so much sense when you stop to think about it, but when you are just focusing on the beautiful scenery for a memorial, it doesn't cross your mind.
You're just looking for a pretty view.
Right. You might hike up to a beautiful rock formation or an ancient, quiet grove of trees and think, wow, this is the perfect spiritual place. It feels so powerful here. But you might not realize that the reason it feels powerful and the reason it is protected is because that specific spot is an ancient indigenous burial ground.
Or the site of a historic battle.
Or an active archaeological dig site where they are studying soil layers from 2,000 years ago.
Exactly. And introducing modern human remains, even in the form of sterile ashes, into a historically or culturally significant site can be deeply problematic on multiple levels. From a purely scientific and archaeological standpoint, you're introducing foreign modern material into a preserved site.
Messing up the data.
Exactly. If archaeologists are testing the soil in the future, a sudden influx of modern calcium phosphate could disrupt their data. But more importantly, from a cultural and spiritual standpoint, particularly regarding indigenous lands, it can be viewed as profoundly disrespectful.
Right. You are taking a modern memorial practice and imposing it onto a site that is already sacred to a specific community or tribe.
Yes, it is about respecting the boundaries of those who came before us. You want your loved one's tribute to be beautiful and meaningful, but you certainly don't want it to inadvertently trample on the historical or cultural integrity of the land or to disrespect another culture's sacred space.
Which, again, reinforces the need to do your homework and communicate with the park officials. They know the hidden history of the land, not just the topography.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's transition from the history of the land to the actual physical earth itself. Let's get into the science of the ash. Because the rules aren't just about where you stand, they are heavily focused on how the ashes interact with the environment once they leave your hands.
This is where we get into the principles of environmental stewardship. Let's look at the chemistry. Cremated remains are mostly composed of calcium phosphate, along with some trace minerals like sodium and potassium.
No, wait. We established earlier that they are sterile. They aren't toxic. Calcium phosphate is a naturally occurring mineral, so if it's natural and it's sterile, why does the park care how the ashes hit the ground? What is the actual environmental danger of just pouring them out at the base of a beautiful tree?
The crucial mechanism here is concentration versus dispersal. While calcium phosphate is a natural mineral and it is relatively harmless in a vacuum, dumping a massive concentrated pile of it onto a small patch of soil is highly disruptive to an ecosystem.
Highly disruptive how?
Let's think about a specific delicate ecosystem, like an alpine tundra or a specialized forest floor. The soil there has a very specific, often delicate pH balance that native plants rely on to survive. Some native mosses and ferns need incredibly acidic, nutrient-poor soil.
Okay, I follow you.
When you dump a solid, concentrated pile of high pH calcium phosphate onto that 1 square foot of earth, it's like dropping a chemical bomb on that specific microenvironment. It acts as an overwhelming, smothering blanket. It radically alters the localized soil chemistry,
Oh, wow.
right? And it could literally burn the fragile roots of native plants, kill off the specialized soil microbes and insects that keep the dirt healthy, and leave a temporary dead zone where nothing native can grow.
That's
And worse, that sudden spike in calcium might invite invasive weed species that thrive in that new chemical environment, permanently altering that patch of the park.
wow. Okay, so it isn't that the ashes are poison. It is that too much of anything in one spot throws nature out of balance. It is a massive shock to the system of that specific patch of dirt.
Precisely. And that is why park authorities and environmental laws explicitly mandate a technique called the broad dispersal method. You cannot just tip the urn over and leave a gray, concentrated pile on the ground. You are legally required to scatter them widely, casting them over a broad area or trenching them in a long, shallow line that is immediately covered back up with natural soil.
How does one actually do that in practice? Are you just throwing it like birdseed?
Essentially, yes. You
Yeah.
cast it into the wind, being very mindful of the direction, of course, or you use a rake to gently integrate it into a large area of soil. This broad dispersal allows the mineral fragments to integrate seamlessly and naturally with the environment without overwhelming the localized chemistry.
Dilution is the solution.
Exactly. The calcium phosphate gets diluted over a wide area, minimizing the environmental impact to almost zero. The ecosystem can easily absorb a dusting of minerals. It cannot absorb a concentrated brick of it.
That makes so much sense. And speaking of casting ashes into the wind, I was reading about environmental variables that I never ever would have considered, like the weather.
Oh, the weather's a huge factor.
Some parks will actually temporarily restrict or ban ash scattering during periods of extreme dry conditions or high fire risk. At first, I was completely baffled. I thought, wait, ashes are already burned. They can't start a forest fire.
They definitely cannot.
Right. But then I realized it's not about the fire risk of the ashes, it's about the dust.
Yes, the airborne dust factor is huge. During a severe drought, the ecosystem is already incredibly stressed. The vegetation is dry, brittle, and struggling to survive. The soil is loose and dusty. If you go out and scatter a large amount of fine, powdery ash into the wind during a dry spell, that dust doesn't just settle gently.
What happens to it?
It gets picked up by the wind and can thickly coat the surrounding fragile vegetation. This coating of white powder can literally block sunlight from reaching the leaves, further stressing or even killing plants that are already fighting to survive a drought.
It's suffocating the plants.
Yes.
And I imagine that dust blowing around is also a massive issue for the other people in the park. We've all seen the comedy trope where a gust of wind blows Uncle Bob right back into the family's faces. It's funny in a movie, but from an environmental and legal standpoint, that wind factor is a huge deal. It can easily blow into the faces of other visitors on nearby trails.
Which goes right back to the issue of public nuisance and shared spaces.
Exactly. So, checking the daily weather, the wind advisory, and park alerts isn't just about making sure you don't get rained on during your ceremony. It is a critical legal and environmental requirement. It is fascinating how interconnected every single action is in a protected ecosystem. Every variable matters. But what if you are terrified of the wind? What if you don't want to deal with raking ashes into the soil or risking a gust blowing them the wrong way? I found a brilliant modern solution to these environmental challenges in the research. Biodegradable urns.
They truly are an elegant modern invention. For families who are concerned about the wind blowing the ashes back onto them, which is a very common, very valid anxiety during these ceremonies.
I would be terrified of that.
Right. Or for families who simply don't want to actively throw or handle the ashes, a biodegradable urn is a perfect solution. These are specialized containers made entirely of natural, untreated materials.
Like what kind of materials?
You can find them made of recycled paper, compressed sand, raw rock salt, or even gelatin.
And how do they work in practice at the park?
Instead of opening the urn and scattering, you place the entire sealed urn directly into a shallow trench in the earth. Or, in specific permitted marine environments, you place it directly onto the water. Over a relatively short period of time, sometimes just a few hours in the water or a few weeks in the moist soil, the container completely dissolves and breaks down into natural elements.
That is so smart.
It introduces the ashes into the environment slowly, gently, and safely, without leaving any permanent plastic or metal container behind as litter. It aligns perfectly with the park's environmental mandates while giving the family a very dignified, controlled ceremony.
It is a beautiful way to ensure compliance while also creating a very gentle, peaceful moment. But, as we were talking through all of this, the soil chemistry, the permits, the biodegradable urns, I just realized a massive blind spot in our entire discussion.
What's the
We figured out exactly what to do once we are standing in the park, but how do you actually get the urn to the park in the first place?
logistics?
Right. If my mom's absolute dream resting place is in a state park in the mountains of Colorado, but I live in an apartment in New York City, I have to get through the airport first.
This is a critical logistical hurdle that trips up so many families.
Yeah.
It is the journey before the destination. You spend all your time researching the Colorado State Park rules, but you completely forget that you have to cross half the country to get there. The legal framework begins the moment you leave your house, not just the moment you enter the state park.
Okay, let's dive into this because I imagine the Transportation Security Administration has some very strict opinions on how you travel with human remains. Can I just put the urn in my checked luggage and hope for the best?
You should never, under any circumstances, put an urn in your checked luggage.
Really?
Well,
Never.
never. Airlines strongly advise against it, and some outright prohibit it, because checked bags get subjected to incredibly rough handling. They get lost and they get delayed. The risk of the urn breaking open in the cargo hold or the bag going missing entirely is too high. You must bring the ashes as a carry-on item. But navigating the TSA checkpoint with a carry-on urn requires very specific preparation.
What happens at the security checkpoint?
The most critical rule is that the urn or container must be able to pass through the X-ray machine successfully. The TSA agent must be able to clearly see the contents inside the container on their screen to verify that it does not contain prohibited items or explosives. This means the material of the container is everything.
So no metal urns.
Right. If you show up at airport security with a thick, heavy bronze urn or a lead-lined ceramic container, the X-ray machine cannot penetrate it. The screen will just show a solid, opaque block.
And what if that happens? Can't the TSA agent just open the lid and look inside to verify it's just ashes?
No. Out of respect for the deceased, TSA policy explicitly forbids agents from opening an urn to check the contents. Even if you give them permission to do so, they will not open it and they will not probe it. So if the X-ray cannot see through the material and the agent cannot open it, the urn is not getting on the airplane, period.
Oh my God, that is a nightmare scenario. Imagine being an hour away from your flight, you're traveling across the country to honor your mother, your entire family is waiting for you in Colorado, and airport security tells you that you have to leave her remains behind because you brought the wrong type of box.
It is devastating. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it happens more often than you would think.
A perfectly planned, legally compliant state park ceremony is completely ruined because of a transportation complication at the airport.
Exactly. To avoid this, you must travel with a temporary container made of a material that is easily X-rayed. Wood, clear plastic, or non-lead-lined glass are usually safe bets. Many funeral homes will provide a temporary plastic travel urn specifically designed to pass TSA requirements if you ask them.
And then you just switch it later.
You can always transfer the ashes into a more ceremonial biodegradable urn once you arrive at your destination. Also, always carry the official certificate of cremation from the funeral home or crematorium with you. While it doesn't exempt you from the X-ray rule, it helps explain the separation quickly to the agents.
Okay, so flying requires a very specific type of container. But what if I don't want to fly with them? What if I want to mail the ashes to my brother, who already lives in Colorado, and he can bring them to the park? Can I just pack them in a FedEx box with some bubble wrap?
Absolutely not. You cannot use FedEx, you cannot use UPS, and you cannot use DHL. None of the private courier services are legally allowed to transport human remains.
Wow, none of them.
None of them. The United States Postal Service, the USPS, is the only legal carrier for cremated remains in the United States. And even then, you cannot just slap a regular stamp on a brown box. The USPS has incredibly strict packaging, labeling, and tracking requirements.
Walk me through that. How do you legally mail ashes?
You must use their Priority Mail Express service. This ensures the package is tracked every step of the way and handled with priority. The ashes must be double packaged. They need to be in a sift-proof inner container, like a sealed plastic bag inside a sturdy urn, and then that urn must be placed inside a strong, padded outer shipping box.
That makes sense. You don't want anything spilling.
Exactly. But most importantly, you must use a specific bright orange label provided by the post office called Label 139, which clearly marks the package as containing cremated remains. This alerts the postal workers to handle the box with the utmost care and respect, and ensures it doesn't get tossed around indiscriminately.
Okay. So the logistics are intense, but entirely manageable if you know the rules. Let's fast forward. You successfully navigated the USPS or the airlines. You found the right state park jurisdiction. You got the correct permit. You hiked to the secluded spot the ranger recommended. The weather is perfect. And you used the broad dispersal method.
You did everything right.
Right. Now we are at the end of the ceremony itself. And this brings us to a really beautiful but challenging philosophy that governs all public lands. Leave no trace.
Leave no trace is the foundational philosophy of all public land management worldwide. It means exactly what it sounds like. When you leave the environment, there should be absolutely no physical evidence that you or your group were ever there. The ecosystem should look exactly as it did before you arrived.
And while this is a wonderful environmental standard, it creates a profound paradox for grieving families trying to hold a memorial.
It does, a huge paradox.
Because human grief usually demands a monument. It is baked into our DNA. We want to mark a permanent memory. We want to put down a gravestone or hammer a cross into the ground or attach a small brass plaque to a bench to say, my loved one was here and they mattered.
We want to leave a mark.
Exactly. But how do you mark a permanent memory without leaving a permanent marker? Because the leave no trace rules explicitly state you cannot leave anything behind.
The rules are absolute on this, and park rangers are very strict about enforcement. You're required to pack out and remove any urns, containers, decorative items, photos, and, yes, even flowers.
Wait, flowers too. I think a lot of people assume, oh, I'll just leave this beautiful bouquet of roses by the tree where we scattered the ashes. Flowers are natural. They will decompose. Why is that a violation?
It seems harmless, but it actually poses a significant threat to the ecosystem. Commercially grown flowers that you buy at a florist often contain heavy pesticides and chemical fertilizers that you do not want leaching into a pristine state park soil.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Furthermore, those bouquets often contain non-native seeds or plant species. Introducing non-native plants into a protected ecosystem is a massive violation because those seeds can germinate, spread, and become invasive species that choke out the native flora. So, you cannot leave flowers. You cannot carve initials into a tree trunk. You cannot build a small, decorative pile of rocks known as a cairn, as a shrine. You must leave the landscape exactly as you found it.
So, how do we solve the paradox of wanting a monument but not being allowed to build one?
We turn to modern, invisible solutions.
This is where the research I was doing got incredibly innovative. It discussed using GPS coordinates as a private, invisible memorial marker. I think this is absolutely brilliant. It solves the problem perfectly.
It is a perfect synthesis of modern technology and ancient landscapes. When you are standing at the exact spot where you scattered the ashes, that quiet clearing the ranger told you about, you simply pull out your smartphone, open your mapping app, and drop a GPS pin.
So simple.
You save those exact, precise coordinates. You haven't left a physical plaque that disrupts the natural beauty of the park. You haven't harmed a tree or moved a rock, but you have created an incredibly precise, permanent anchor for your memory.
It creates such a beautiful sense of continuity. You and anyone in your family you share those coordinates with can navigate back to that exact square foot of Earth next year or 10 years from now or 50 years from now to reflect and remember. The memorial exists permanently in the digital realm, leaving the physical realm completely untouched and wild.
Exactly. And families are taking this a step further with the creation of online tribute pages and digital archives. Instead of a physical gravestone in a cemetery, you have a digital space where you can upload the photos of that beautiful scenic overlook, the GPS coordinates, the text of the eulogies that were shared during the ceremony, and videos of the loved one.
It democratizes the mourning process.
It really does. It allows distant relatives who couldn't fly out to Colorado for the scattering to still share in the remembrance and vividly see the final resting place.
And this digital approach enhances, rather than hinders, the actual physical act of the scattering. When you understand the science and the law, the ceremony takes on a new weight. The very act of scattering the ashes gently into the wind or the earth symbolizes returning a loved one to nature and acknowledging the continuation of life's cycle.
It's a very intentional act.
When you commit to leave no trace, when you refuse to impose permanent structures, concrete or plastic on the landscape, you are truly allowing your loved one to become one with the wild environment they loved. You are actively participating in the conservation of the land.
That is a very powerful perspective shift. You aren't just following rules to avoid getting a citation from a ranger. You are acting as a steward. You are actively protecting the sacred landscape that your loved one cherished. You are making sure that the forest clearing remains just as pristine, wild, and beautiful for the next family and the next generation as it was for you. You are honoring them by preserving the place they loved.
So what does this all mean for us? As we wrap up this deep dive, the overarching summary is clear. Navigating the jurisdictional jungles to find out who owns the land, filling out the permit paperwork, understanding the soil chemistry of calcium phosphate, respecting crowd dynamics and noise levels, and dealing with the TSA. None of this is just mindless, punitive, bureaucratic red tape.
No, not at all.
It is a vital framework for respect. It is a way to honor a loved one while simultaneously being a fierce steward of the earth. When you combine legal awareness with meaningful, thoughtful planning, you entirely eliminate the anxiety of compliance. You create the mental and physical space for genuine, uninterrupted emotional reflection. You ensure that a profound tribute remains both deeply personal and entirely lawful.
That is beautifully summarized. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals something truly profound about how human memory and mourning are evolving in the 21st century.
I'm curious what you mean by that.
Well, for millennia, humanity's instinct was to conquer nature in order to remember our dead. We built massive physical monuments, the Egyptian pyramids, sprawling marble cemeteries, towering granite gravestones. We sought to leave an undeniable permanent physical scar on the earth to prove that we and the people we loved existed.
We needed to leave a literal mark.
Right. But what we are seeing now with these park guidelines and these modern practices is a fundamental shift in the human ego. Through the use of digital archives, online tribute pages, and precise invisible GPS coordinates mapped onto fiercely protected, untouched public lands, we are learning an entirely new way to mourn. We are learning to anchor our deepest, most profound memories invisibly. We are finding ways to allow the natural world to remain wild, pristine, and unburdened by our physical monuments, while still holding our most personal, sacred histories close to our hearts. It is a quiet, beautiful evolution of the human spirit.